you cannot mandate vaccines because these vaccines are approved under something called an emergency use authorization, EUA. And by law, you can't mandate a vaccine approved under an emergency use authorization. So you can't say, for example, college students must have a vaccine. You cannot mandate a vaccine under an EUA. You can mandate measles, which had a full approval, etc., but you can't mandate these vaccines, which are still all under emergency use authorization.
If you're curious about the new vaccine mandates and what this means for you as you reemerge into this new society, I was too, which is why I wanted to provide you with as much information as we all go into this new society. So this video will not be hyperbolic, it will not have strong suggestions, it's just legal information so that you can be informed as you make your decisions, as you return to the workplace, as you begin attending entertainment venues. I want you to be informed. If you're curious, my name is Mariam Greenidge and I'm an attorney, and we talk about all things legal on this channel, and I hope that it's informative. If it's your first time here, don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you're a returning viewer, I appreciate you coming back to hear what I have to say. And without further ado, we will get into this video. What does the vaccine mandates? What are medical, religious, or philosophical exemptions, and how can that apply for your daily lives? Many individuals in the US as well as globally are being met with what seems like compulsory vaccinations, where they must be vaccinated in order to enter restaurants, return to work, and/or attend certain entertainment venues. Municipal and state employees particularly are being compelled to vaccinate or face being tested weekly or face termination. This is not only in the United States, France, Italy, Australia. We've all been seeing the protests against these mandates that have been going on for several weeks. However, what I mentioned earlier in this video, I want to avoid hyperbole and lay out some facts, like I did in my previous video where I discussed, can the government mandate vaccines? Long and short of it, no. But they're trying to create hurdles that make it seem like the vaccine is mandatory. However, it cannot become mandatory for several reasons, which I will discuss in this video. And I want to emphasize 3 things in this video. This is not a vaccine, but an experimental use authorization authorized by the Food and Drug Administration. And what is that? An emergency use authorization is not a license, and so the legal question is whether or not you can mandate an emergency observation for a vaccine. Like, can you decide this is emergency use but mandate as if it is a vaccine? So what is emergency use authorization, or EUA? An emergency use authorization, or EUA, is a mechanism to facilitate the availability and use of medical countermeasures, including vaccines, during public health emergencies such as the current pandemic. Under an EUA, the FDA may allow the use of an unapproved medical product or an unapproved use of an approved medical product in emergency to diagnose, treat, or prevent serious or life-threatening disease or conditions when certain statutory criteria have been met, including that there are no available or adequate alternatives other than this emergency use medical device. So the FDA allows for the emergency use when there are no other medications to treat this condition. So until alternatives are developed, the current vaccines are permissible. All emergency use authorizations have a finite shelf life. When the HHS Secretary terminates the EUA declaration, all EUA granted by the FDA are also terminated. Another point, an emergency use authorization is not a clearance or approval for the medical device. In fact, the FDA specifically prohibits a company from making any such claims in the marketing materials and requires the company to use specific labeling per the conditions of the EUA. During an emergency, many unscrupulous manufacturers make wild, unsubstantiated claims on the websites or other advertisements. FDA has aggressively gone after them and issued several warning letters. With that being said, because these are not vaccines, the law and language as to how it's applied to the vaccine law as we know it, which are licensed by the FDA, we're figuring out how that works. And it's rather clever because it's marketed as if it's a vaccine, but it's really emergency use. So keep that in mind. There's no license for these. There's also a distinction. Medical providers can mandate vaccines, but not emergency use, which is why you see the government saying in a very clever way that you can't do this if you're not vaccinated, but not really requiring it either. It's sort of like depriving a person of a privilege, but not a right. So in terms of employment, however, if an employer is a for-profit entity, while they're certainly free to encourage their employees and students and other members to become vaccinated, the federal law provides that at least until the vaccine is licensed, individuals must have the option to accept or decline or to be vaccinated. Knowing what an organization can or cannot do with respect to these vaccines can help keep them out of legal trouble as well as keep everyone safe and avoid a lot of costly, time-consuming litigation that is likely to be coming down the pike in the next year or two, if the employer don't handle this in a very sensitive and sensible way. Because courts are opening up and lawsuits are rolling in. Given the uncertainty about the vaccine, the EUA are explicit that each is an investigational vaccine and not unlicensed, and so requires that all promotional material relating to COVID-19 vaccine clearly and conspicuously state that this product has not been approved or licensed by the FDA, but it has been authorized only for emergency use by the FDA. Also, in another section of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, this authorizes that the FDA to grant emergency use requires that the Secretary of Health and Human Services to ensure that individuals to whom the product is administered are informed of the option to accept or refuse the administration of the products. So individuals have the option to accept or refuse, but it's not represented in this way as we've been seeing. Rather, there's a strong encouragement to accept what looks like compulsion, and refusal means that people must be tested weekly in the case of employment, or even if they refuse, they may be suspended or terminated without pay in many instances. So now that we know what an EUA means, does the medical exemption apply to them? Perhaps, but again, there's a gap in the analysis because exemptions are used for vaccines, which may be mandatory for school, for certain jobs, but there aren't any exemptions as we know it for emergency use. So we're applying the criteria as we know it for vaccine exemptions to emergency use. So what is a medical exemption? A medical exemption happens when there's a condition or circumstance for someone who they cannot receive the vaccine for medical reasons, usually for children. Something to know, vaccine exemption laws vary from state to state, so there's no universal federal guideline. Some states make it easier to avoid vaccines than others. In 1855, Massachusetts became the first state to require children to get vaccinated and in order to attend school. All those states soon followed with their own vaccination laws. The laws of these states were essentially to protect children and communities from contagious diseases. A medical exemption is allowed when a child has a medical condition that prevents him or her from receiving a vaccine. Parents can ask for a medical exemption if a vaccine would not be safe for their child. Reasons that a child can receive an exemption include they have a disease or take medication that weakens their immune system, they have a severe allergy to a vaccine or an ingredient in the vaccine, or they have a serious reaction to vaccines in the past. To receive a medical exemption, parents simply have to have their doctor sign a form. Many states ask whether the exemption is temporary or permanent, and almost half the states require doctors to sign a new form every year or so. If you remember, if you're old enough to remember the immunization that had to be filled out every year in order for you to attend school, something to this extent. All but 3 states offer non-medical exemptions for religious or philosophical reasons, which is the other type of exemption. So there's a medical exemption, there's a religious exemption, and there's a personal or philosophical exemption. So what is a religious exemption? Religious exemptions allow parents to opt out of the vaccine for a religious belief. Every state except California, Maine, Mississippi, New York, and West Virginia allow religious exemptions. Some states ask for evidence that a family belongs to a religious group that objects to vaccine, but in most states, you can simply sign a form stating that you have a religious reason to opt out. I think it's rather draconian to ask anyone to provide proof that they belong to an organization in order to avoid vaccine. Also, some states allow for religious exemptions if you belong to a religious organization that knowingly objects to vaccination. But this is sort of teetering on violating First Amendment rights, requiring proof of that. Other states simply require that a parent sign a form stating that he or she has a religious exemption, a religious objection to vaccination. I think that's fine enough. Several legal cases involving the constitutionality of religious exemption vaccinations have been tried. The rulings have in general upheld the right of a state to mandate vaccination in spite of a parent's religious belief. At the same time, courts have often found that the requiring parent belong to a certain religious group to qualify for religious exemption violates the Constitution Equal Protection Clause. The argument in the Equal Protection Clause should protect all people who claim a religious exemption, and so the requirement of proof that you actually belong to a religious organization is a bit over the top. So what are personal or philosophical exemptions? The exemption is pretty much based on a parent's personal belief about vaccines. Some parents are concerned about vaccine safety. 20 states allow exemptions to children whose parents have philosophical or personal belief exemptions to vaccinations. In most cases, parents must file a one-time or an annual form whenever school rolls around again with the school district attesting to a personal objection to vaccinations. In states with 3 types of exemptions, personal belief exemptions tend to be the most commonly used, and so for reasons probably because it's a lower threshold and easier to get past. You don't have to go to a rabbi or priest showing proof that you belong to a religious entity. Personal exemptions are harder to get in other states. In certain states, parents have to do one or more of these things in order to get a personal exemption. Talk to their doctor or read about the benefits of vaccines and the risk of not vaccinating their children. Get a signature from a local health department official. Writing a letter that explains the reasons for refusing vaccines, or renew their exemption form every year. So as you can see, the requirements is a very low threshold and totally doable. It's just probably more of a nuisance than anything. While organizations are certainly free to encourage their employees, their students, and other members to become vaccinated, the federal law provides that at least until the vaccine is licensed, individuals must have the option to accept or decline the vaccination. Knowing what an organization can do or cannot do with respect to the COVID-19 vaccines can help them keep their employees, students, and members safe, and also save them from costly and time-consuming litigation, which will be coming down the pike. Dr. Amanda Cohn, the Executive Secretary of the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, was asked if the COVID-19 vaccination can be required. She responded that under the EUA, vaccines are not allowed to be mandatory. So early in the vaccination phase, individuals will have to be consented and they won't be able to be mandatory. Cohn later affirmed that the prohibition on requiring the vaccine applies to organizations, including hospitals. So this is from the horse's mouth, that it cannot be mandatory. What this means in practice, though, is when the FDA grants emergency use authorization for a vaccine, many questions about the product cannot be answered. Given the open questions with Congress granting the authority to issue EUA, it chose to require that every individual should be allowed to decide for him or herself whether or not to receive an EUA product. The FDA and the CDC apparently consider this a fundamental requirement or of choice important enough that even during the height of the pandemic, they reinforced that the policy decision when issuing their guidance related to the COVID-19 vaccine. This means that an organization will likely be at odds with federal law if it requires its employees, students, or other members to get a vaccine that is being distributed under emergency use. State law often prohibits retaliating against an employee for refusing to participate in a violation of federal law. Organizations that require COVID-19 vaccination in violation of the federal law may face lawsuits under these states' laws, not only that block policy, but also damages and attorney fees. Such potential costly lawsuits can be avoided by refraining from adopting policies that require vaccination or penalize people for choosing not to be vaccinated. Organizations, of course, are free to encourage vaccinations through internal communications, through educational events, and even other measures to urge employees to become vaccinated. They can take these measures so long as, one, they are not viewed as coercive. Two, the organization makes it clear that the decision regarding whether to receive the vaccine is voluntary. And three, the measures comply with the requirement in the EUA's related regulations for these products. People's lives have been totally upended by the pandemic, so I understand the urgency to get on with things and get as many people vaccinated as possible. But organizations must be careful and mindful. And that consensus in the legal community has been that, at least in the private sectors, employers may require employees to become vaccinated, subject to accommodations that may be required for medical or religious reasons. But vaccine mandates may still be risky for employers. It is possible that employees who are terminated for refusing to receive a vaccine authorized by the FDA under EUA could try to pursue claims for wrongful termination. The regulatory framework is still unclear. Also, some states are considering legislation that will prohibit employers from requiring employees to receive a COVID-19. I think Florida is doing that. Florida is sort of being very careful and not requiring it and leaving it as an individual choice, which I think during a very frantic time is the best course of action to avoid any extreme views and leave a lot of flexibility, because we don't know what the outcome of draconian and restrictions can mean in the long run. Again, we've never seen anything like this, of this magnitude that affects the world globally, so we must tread carefully. As individuals, if you're an employer, be mindful. Be expressive that you don't know how to handle this, and be as considerate to the different opinions circulating this controversial issue as well. So I hope this information has been helpful. If you have any comments, drop that in the comment section. I'm going to link the information regarding medical exemptions also in the description box. So if you want to read up more about that, if you want to see what a form looks like for a medical exemption for a school or an employer, I will provide that as well. So again, thank you for watching. Thank you for your support. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.